most of my working career has been in Midland, at the Midland Public Library as a children's librarian, with a great deal of work done in the reference department, genealogy especially, a lot of local history I'm quite knowledgeable on, and I've met, so I could tell stories for hours on the people I met that have come in that it just was so exciting. Prior to that, I worked for the Township of Tiny in the planning department, and a lot of the historical research, I wet my feet in that because they had all the original census records and agricultural records. So on my lunch hour, I'd spend a lot of time looking through those, and that dealt with interest in my own family. That my father, the Reynolds side of the family, came to Tiny in 1868, two brothers, 16 and 18, and they settled south of Wybridge. And the majority of their family are still in the area, which is interesting that when they finally got there, they stayed, whereas before that, they lived in many, many places. My mother's side, the Lamb side especially, they came to Canada in 1828, and they came up to this area in 1878 and settled in the LaFontaine area before they moved to Waverley. And I'm always, well, I'm a keen genealogist. I go to every cemetery I go past, and I've done a lot of research in the United States and in England, where ancestors and descendants live in those areas. So I find that history just excites me, and I've been on numerous heritage committees. I've done 2 or 3 books, 2 on Wybridge, 1 on Tiny Township, and part of a book on Cavan Township. So, and I used to write a column in the Tiny Cottager, Anthony Lancia's newspaper that he had for a while, the Observer, and also in the Penetang. What was the one that Debbie Levy had? I wrote a column in that one too. So I've always had a great interest in local history and in the area. And except for, bouts off for university and other education, I've pretty well been here all that time.
Now, are you a farm girl?
I'm a farm girl, yep. Farm girl first and foremost, still am. That I was raised on, we had dairy cattle when I was very young, and then it turned into beef cattle. Having 2 sisters and 1 brother, you maybe did a little more than if there were, if it was all boys. And I can change oil and do things yet and cut hay. I still am doing that, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So.
And where did you go to school?
Well, I started in Wybridge, and then when I didn't go to a 1-room school. Wybridge had 4 rooms. And then when the 1-room schools were closed, everything was all divided up, and I ended up going to Bayview School in Midland. Then high school was at Penetang. That normally I would have went to Midland, but it was too full at the time, so the kids from Tiny went to Penetang. I stayed there, went to Guelph University. It was sort of a toss-up between agriculture, but history and geography went out because 2 of my mentors from high school, Paul Quilty and David Moore, were very keen in that area and encouraged my interest, and so I went to Guelph. And I originally thought I was going to be a planner, but at that time women were not, different places, they wouldn't hire you if you were a woman. I thought, well, if that's, throw that out, I won't do that. And it was just, I went to the Ministry of Natural Resources and did historical research for a few years, loved it. Worked with Pierre Burton's, the woman, I can't think of her name right now, but the lady that did the research for him, I actually worked with her, and that was exciting. And then saw the ad for the library one day for a children's librarian, and I love kids. And I was fortunate I got the job and was there for 37 years. But my education didn't stop for many years, because I took correspondence from Toronto University in Canadian genealogy, Arlington University in Virginia, and I also went to Georgian College on weekends for 7 years, almost every Saturday, to get my credentials to work in a library, even though I worked here full time. I was always down in the reference on my lunch hour looking at the materials there, and we were always advertised as the best reference library north of Toronto because of Catherine Mackenzie, who was a librarian at the University of Toronto, I guess it was, and we had things that many other libraries didn't have, and she used to make you wear little white gloves when you touched the objects and that, and I was just in heaven at lunchtime. I'd bring my lunch. I didn't eat it while I was handling the things, but, and then people would come in from all over on holidays doing their genealogy, and they'd go see Bonnie, and that developed from there, and it was an exciting time. Elwee Yost, he was coming, and on the way here, he broke his foot, and he couldn't come, so that was rather sad. But what was very, very nice, he wrote me a nice letter apologizing, and he wanted to know about Midland, because when he was young, he worked here in the summertime. He was in plays that were put on and that type of thing. So he started asking me about different older people, well, they were older then, in Midland, were they still living, like the Steers, and I can't think of the names now, but he asked me about all these people. So I wrote him back. Then he wrote me back, oh, if you ever come visit, or come to Victoria, Vancouver, come visit. My son isn't married yet. And he was the one that did, the movie where the Can't Stop the Bus.
Right.
And he said, we want grandchildren, would you come out to meet him? And I'm thinking, this is like a dating service. So I said, no, thank you, that's very nice that you thought of that, but I didn't have an interest. But that was pretty funny. But we were fortunate. We had a lot of good authors, illustrators. Some of them were quite, one fellow came and you had to provide him with a bottle of rum. And he sat in the kitchen and drank like a whole glass before he did the program. Or some you'd have to take out for a meal, and they didn't want ordinary fare. They want something quite different. And it was like trying to find that for them. And it was had nothing to do with children's literature, really, but other than that they worked in it. But it made me think for a while that children's authors were all drunks or something. but it was funny. The fellow that wrote the Hardy Boys, Leslie McFarlane, and he was very interesting. He came, and for I can't remember the number of the years, but so many years after he wrote them, he could never tell anybody he wrote them. Even his sons didn't know that. Nobody knew he was the author. And then he could finally tell about that, and he was very interesting. And his son, we had one time too, Brian McFarlane, I think his name was, and he was on Hockey Night in Canada. And I think he wrote with his father The Ghost of the Hardy Boys, which really told
a real story.
Yeah, and actually the father actually wrote some of the Nancy Drew books as well.